Welcome to the React Native Show podcast brought to you by Callstack, a total software engineering consultancy. My name is Kuba Urban and I am your Coffee Talk host today. I have two more guests, but wait for it. They're special and I will introduce them. For now, I just wanted to say that we will talk about the state of React Native, and all things around it. We're going to talk about journeys in the tech industry and how it can look like for, everyone else, basically. Maybe this will inspire your journey. So my guests today, one of them is my fellow Callstacker, Ola. Ola, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hi. So my name is Ola. This is shorthand for Alexandra, but I always go by Ola because it's confusing that these two names are one name.
Yeah.
So I've been working at Callstack for the last, over 2.5 years, and in the same project with Kuba for like half a year or a year.
Or even a year, maybe.
A very interesting project. We work on TVs, mobile phones, web, everything. And it's challenging and it's fun.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ola. And I'm glad to have you here today. And my second guest, it's a special guest because she is not from Callstack and she is from far away because from UK. Anisha, can you please introduce yourself? Tell us something more about what you do on an everyday basis.
Sure. Hi, guys. I'm Anisha and I'm a developer advocate at the Amazon App Store. And usually when I introduce myself, the first question that goes to everyone's mind is like, what is a developer advocate? So it's kind of my job to make it easier for all the developers to develop for Amazon App Store. So whatever shape or form that takes, sometimes it's writing articles, sometimes it's writing sample code, sometimes it's coming on podcasts like these. But yeah, it's my role just to make it easier for you to develop TV apps, tablet apps, so anything that goes on Amazon App Store and Fire OS. But my background is React Native and my focus is on React Native apps for Fire OS.
Lovely. So basically, whenever I cry over my project here, I should just call you and be like, hey, Anisha, please help.
Yes, and I will try my very best to help because usually one person's problem is similar to other people's. So if I can solve it for you, I'm sure I'll help other people.
All right. Awesome. So yes, people, as you can see and hear, we have a lovely team today. And ladies here will talk about their journeys. So, sit back and have a good listen, good watch, depending on the platform. So maybe we'll start with Anisha. So, Anisha, how did you start your tech career? Like, what sparked the idea? What brought you to us?
Yeah. So I did engineering at university. So I did biomedical engineering, which is very not related to what I do now. When I was looking for jobs, I knew that I wanted to stay in London, which is probably not a good reason to be applying for jobs, but it was my motivation. And I started as a technical consultant at IBM. And while I was there, a lot of the projects were React and React Native based. So I would annoy the developers into teaching me because the project management side or the things that you had to do as a grad were not as interesting as what they seemed to be doing. I did have a bit of background. So I did C++ and a bit of machine learning in uni, but I think it was just really seeing like the cool things that the developers were building. So I learned JavaScript, taught myself while I was on the job, and then begged someone to put me on a project that was React. And that made me learn React. So I did React, like front-end development for about 4 years. And while I was doing that, a lot of things that I was learning, I felt like would consolidate it by sharing it. So I did a few talks, and that's sort of how I ended up at Amazon as a developer advocate. Because sharing what I knew was like a way for me to learn more. And I didn't even realize it was a role that existed, but here I am. And my final project at IBM was like working on a React Native app for the last 2 years. So that's sort of how I got into React Native. But it was definitely JS, React, and then React Native.
Awesome. And by the way, that role that you have right now, the developer advocate, was it like proposed to you because they saw that you are good at it, or was it something that you opted for and be like, hey, I want to do this stuff?
I think it was a bit of both. So it was like I was looking for a new job at that time. And I think the person who hired me had seen that I'd done some talks, and one of my talks that was like quite well, that went, I don't know, I wouldn't say viral or anything, but it was just like, it got a couple of views, and it was like called New Kid on the Blockchain. And I was just talking about like how I learned blockchain, and then I built like a React layer on top of a blockchain app. And I think like he saw like this coupling of like different technologies and me explaining it, and thought that's like what it takes for a developer advocate, is being able to like take these complex problems and sort of make it digestible, but also find a way to talk about things that might not necessarily be being talked about. So that's sort of how I ended up at Amazon.
Are you a secret Bitcoin billionaire? If you know,
I wish. I wish. I wouldn't have a radiator then. I'd have.
It'll be golden.
Well, I mean, at least now I have a better background. Otherwise, you would have some kind of freaking ocean with a beach behind you.
Usually when I record videos, people are like, can you remove the radio? I was like, no, I need to stay warm.
True. It's important. All right, Ola, how about you? How did you start? What brought you to tech?
Well, I studied something completely different because I studied French philology, and I actually wrote a book at the end of my studies that was like literary analysis type of thing. But there's that much work in translating French to Polish, so I've always liked computers, and HTML was just like the easiest thing to learn. So I started by HTML, the CSS, JS, then React, and then React Native. In short, there's like 10 years of my life in one sentence, but yeah.
So how did you actually stumble upon the React Native? Like, was it just random project that you jumped in, or how did it?
No, I was like at the beginning where like smartphones were making their appearance. I thought that apps were awesome, and I just played around with anything that was possible to be done with JavaScript. So I started with Ionic, actually. Like I worked with Angular, the first Angular, the prehistoric one, and then Ionic, which sort of sucked. And then I thought like that there must be a better way, and then I found React Native. I saw Flutter on my way, but like I didn't stay long.
Okay, that's good. Because of that, you're with us. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Exactly.
I feel like most developers like start with Angular and they're like, nope, and then they end up on React Native.
Look,
Yeah.
Angular had its time, you know, it was very big and popular, right? Like me, for example, I started web development with Angular because I had a chance to move. I started as a backend developer, and then I had a chance to move up to the full stack, but I had to learn Angular, right? Not the first one. It was the better one already. I don't remember the specific version, but yeah. But from there, I could go to React because I could do the front end, right? And then I had options, so that was nice. But yeah, Angular was there.
And Angular, like I feel like Angular was necessary to make this step from JavaScript just being like this jQuery making buttons pretty thing to something more.
Yeah.
And that's what Angular did for pretty much all front-end development.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but it's interesting to see that Angular was somewhere for everyone, not especially nowadays. All right. So moving on, let's skip a bit ahead, right? Let's leave the beginnings and jump into the now. All right. So nowadays, what do you do nowadays? You maybe with Ola right now. You Ola mentioned that we are working on a project together, building stuff for TVs, mobiles, and stuff like that. Can you say something more about your everyday tasks and job? What do you prefer working on, and what do you work on? How does it look like for you?
Well, actually, I enjoy working on TVs. It's like a special type of challenge because what you have on TVs and you don't have on mobile phones are focus issues, because you have the remote and you have an item that lights up and you move with your remote. So that's always a fun challenge, and we have like a gazillion emulators that we need to work with. And well, I like it when my job is a little bit tough because, you know, it makes me think, and I like when it's challenging.
Okay.
So that's good. That's what I like.
Focus management, and you love it. Oh my God.
I mean, yeah. I didn't say I love it. I said I like it.
Well, that's all, people. That's all. That's okay. Thank you very much. Anisha, how about you? Because your role that you described it sounds like you do a lot of different things. So what do you focus on nowadays?
Yeah, so I guess it's my job to make Ola's job easier, basically. So I actually watched, like, your one of the last episodes of the podcast, and you were talking about developing on TV, and that's basically my focus right now, is like how to make building React Native TV apps easier, or just exploring like what developers are doing right now. I think this year, like, I'm really interested in seeing like how can we test TV apps, because it's such a unexplored area. I mean, like in general, like developing for TV apps is just not as talked about, or there's not as much content around it. I think recently BAM Theodore, they just released a blog on React Native TV, and it's going to be really exciting to see like the content that comes out, because like what I said, there's so many challenges when it comes to TV that you don't see on like mobiles or tablets.
And BAM is... Oh, sorry. BAM is actually, that's okay. BAM is working on like their own focus management library. From what I know.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of testing, like other than really Jest and React Native testing library and a couple of the performance tooling, like there's not much that was built with TV in mind. So that's sort of what I want to look into this year.
And Anisha, do you have like a favorite part of your job, since you have so many jobs wrapped up in one? Is there something that you like more than other tasks?
I think I would say the conferences. Like, I mean, that's where I met everyone from Callstack. I think you get to meet the people who you've admired. Like, I met Lorenzo and Nicola, and I've been using React Native. I've seen their names pop up on GitHub and the change logs like 1,000 times, and to be able to meet them and talk on the same stage as them was amazing. And I actually got to talk about something I really like, which is storybook. So I think that's my favorite part, being able to use the tech I like, see how it might make, developing for Amazon easier, and then being able to share it.
All right. And by the way, you can see Anisha's talking about Storybook on the conference on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and check it out. It was really, really cool. I loved your talk. I loved the storytelling about it. That was so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, same.
So go ahead and check it out if you haven't yet. And oh boy. So I can plug my few words in here as well. I don't really enjoy working with focus management. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Speaking of TVs, it's really interesting that you say that it's very unexplored, because it is. That's true from the technical point of view, but not only, because like UX on TV is completely different than on any other platform as well, right? You need to make users use the remote and be, fine with it, be nice and intuitive, which is not that easy. Which brings, I think, another issue that very often these TV apps, they kind of have similar vibe to them, because, they have the UX that just works. But
they all look like Netflix. Let's just be honest. Like, Netflix like nailed the UI, and everybody's just sort of trying to copy it.
That's true. But now when we see this this spark of TV development and React Native getting there, maybe we'll see something completely new in a couple of months, couple of years. Everything changes so fast.
That's true.
All right. So speaking of changes, if we think about React and React Native, maybe let's focus on React Native for now. 5 years ago, React Native versus today's React Native. Do you have any specific thoughts on that? Like, we know that everything has changed basically, right? There were class components. We can still use them, but let's not. We didn't have hooks and stuff like that. So what are your thoughts? Anisha, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think you nailed the two main ones. I think to understand like the changes in React Native, first of all, like they stem from the changes in React. And I think the major ones were, the recommendation like by React docs themselves, like they updated their docs last year. And you can see this real shift in focus of functional components from class components. And with it, obviously, the recommendation like of a hooks first approach. We've seen the context API come into play. And I think in general, like there's been a lot of changes to how state is handled. So, we saw context come around in 2018, hooks came around in 2019. And I think just the way that you think about building your React and I guess hence React Native app has changed a lot. I personally really like the functional component first approach. Like I never really enjoyed class components, but I still think that they had their advantages, which we can touch on maybe when we go into a little bit more detail about like the benefits of functional versus class or class versus function.
For sure we can get there. Ola, would you like to add anything to that?
I mean, I totally agree. Like if we were to look only at React Native, I wouldn't say, besides all the stuff that changed in React, not much else changed in React Native, right? It's like you said, like all the main changes come from React and they are huge. So if we try to imagine what it was like to try and learn React 5 years ago, like when we learned React, and if we look at someone who would be reading the new documentation now and reading it now, it's like a completely different journey because they are presented with pretty much a different product, maybe I want to say. It's like it's a different thing. It has context, it has hooks. Like before it was just components and you have to deal with the rest on your own. So the mindset is different. I haven't looked at articles because I remember like from all documentation, I remember an article that I loved about the React mindset, and it made a great impression on me. Do you know, Anisha, if that article is still there?
Yeah, it's definitely still there. But I really like as well, like they've brought a lot of those concepts to the forefront. Like when you go into the new docs, like you see, thinking in React, you see like how like hooks first approach. So it's much nicer, I would say. We're learning React today is lucky because it's much nicer. Yeah,
I mean, with the development of all these, like different techniques, different architecture ideas and stuff like that. Also, the development experience improved, right? The developer experience, I think, at least nowadays, I'm not sure 5 years ago, but nowadays, developer experience is one of key factors why people choose React and React Native to work with. And this is quite amazing. Like, I don't recall that 5 years ago, people would stumble upon some technology and they'd be like, nah, this is not a great DX, let's not use it. Nowadays, because we got so much to choose from, people are like focusing on this stuff. And I really love it because, I'm kind of a lazy person when it comes to like, working. So when something requires me doing extra work just because the technology doesn't allow me to do it faster and easier, I'm just so not motivated. It's just another obstacle that comes in the way of my creativity and passion to building, right? And that sucks. So it's great to see that also that improved. We could talk about more stuff.
That improves, of course, but there's a trap there because you have like new devs who only learn, hopefully they learn JavaScript, so they have some like basic knowledge, hopefully, and then they jump into React and they see use effects and context, and then they write websites that suck because they don't realize about re-rendering, about the effect that using like a wide one single context for the whole app that re-renders everything all the time. Or like they don't care about the dependency array and their use effects because they don't understand why it's so important, So, okay, you can go fast. It's nice. It's comfortable. But then you hit a roadblock where your app sucks and you have to like sort of learn all the nitty gritty small problems and you have to work with them.
I think that's like so true. Yeah. And I think like, when you came from class components, like learning about those lifecycle methods, like component did mount, component will mount, like you had those clear entry points for like where you'd initiate state, where you'd clean up state. It was much more kind of intuitive, like to handle cleaning up your resources, setting up your resources. And like, I think, the class components offered like explicit ways, to implement when you had error boundaries. So I think when you come from that way of thinking, like you're more likely to think about where should I set my state up? Like, I think when you start functional first, you're not going to have, for example, components that just handle state or components that just are dumb functional components.
Yeah.
So I think that logic change, it was great to learn, like when you learned class components, because now you can think about setting up your state like, from that way of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the logic was linear, like, right? Because you're setting up your component, it should render or not, right? And now, for example, you get a PR and you see that somebody added or changed a use effect, and it's like 1,000. That's what happens in our project with Kuba, actually. So we have a file that's 1,000 lines long. Somebody adds or changes a use effect, and even in the diff, you don't see the whole file, so you don't know there's like 5 other use effects that sort of, go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Crazy.
I think there was a really great talk at React Advanced London where someone was like, how to use a use effect effectively. And I really like that because I relate so hard to some of these problems. Like literally, if you use the use effect without the dependency array, you're not ever going to realize that it's just in an endless loop, right? Until you, for example, log it out or you check out the performance and you're like, okay, this is like running a re-render every single time. But it's such a simple thing to forget. Like you just forget to put that bracket and that's it. So I get it. I think before you were like forced to put state management in like the higher order components, and then you would think logically about what that lower level component was doing. But nowadays, like it's not as, I would say, what's the right word? I don't know. It's not as clear cut. Like you can have a component that does like 1,000 things.
Yeah.
But also because I think the process of developing in React got easier, right? Depends how you look at it, but let's say
more comfortable for sure.
Yeah, more comfortable, and that makes you as a fresh developer be like, okay, I can build an app by just knowing these basics. That's great, but you don't realize, as you mentioned, like creating a context that's gonna wrap up your whole app, and you're gonna keep your state there. For a fresh developer, it sounds like awesome. I can just keep everything there, right? Yeah. It's nice and intuitive, and then you don't realize that your performance sucks right now, and you don't know why. Back in the days when you had to build stuff step by step with as you mentioned with lifecycle methods and all this stuff, you had to understand why you're doing this and when it's gonna be executed and stuff like that, right? So yeah, if you started with class components, you probably have deeper knowledge nowadays because you had to transition to the more comfortable environment than what you were used to, right? And not even mentioning the React Forget or React compiler.
It's compiler now. Yeah, they just announced it not too long ago.
Yeah, they just announced it, and it seems like it's gonna make the process even easier. You will not even have to care about like memoization and stuff like that. You don't have to care about the use memo or React.memo and stuff like this. So without this knowledge, question is it good or is it not good that it's going to be this simple, I feel like we're going to have so many mediocre apps or just mediocre code everywhere. And only the few ones that are really good and polished with a deeper knowledge in place, right? But yeah, I'm just wondering here because I'm really curious about the
polished.
Future.
No pun intended. Like I've seen tweets where people are wondering if Poland is like a hotbed for React Native development because we have Callstack and software mentioned in Poland.
It's ridiculous.
I want to officially say we do not have React Native universities in Poland. I don't know why we love it.
Look, but Shimon from Callstack, at his high school, he is learning React, but like by the program. So
yeah, but that's Shimon. He's like a 16-year-old who works and does open source. He's just out of this world.
Maybe he doesn't even go to school. He just tells that. Right?
Yeah, it's possible.
It's good you mentioned like open source. Sorry, to kind of digress, but I think one of the main changes in React Native, like I personally have seen over like the kind of last 4 or 5 years, is Expose made it incredibly easy to build those React Native apps. You can build for like multiple platforms from like one code base and like deploy it much more easier than say 5 years ago. And I think like that open source community around React Native, like it's way stronger like than I would say around React. And I think that for React Native is probably one of the key changes like I've personally seen is like how strong the open source community is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's
really good point.
that's a very good point. And we have the biggest migration is Dan Abramov, who moved to Blue Sky, and he's working on React Native. And I guess we're all sort of waiting for him to make our lives even more comfortable and come up with something great.
Come on, Dan. This is a message to you.
Yeah, the clock is ticking. It's been a few months. No new Redux yet.
Yep, no new Redux. Oh, that's a good one. All right. But by the way, do you have any thoughts, like, why the hell React Native has such a big community, like bigger than React? That's what I mean. Like, everything started with React. Like, what happened on the way? Were people just hungry for good, cross-platform functionalities and stuff like that, and they were like, all right, let's do it the correct way? Or what happened? Maybe I missed something.
I honestly wouldn't know, but I'm here for it. I love it. I think it makes like everyone's jobs like 1,000 times easier. I actually made my first open source contribution like very recently, so it was actually to your guys' repo, so React Native testing library. And I think it's just, maybe it's like more welcoming. I don't know if it's more welcoming or it is welcoming. Like, you meet the people working on the things you're using, so it's easier to like feel less intimidated to contribute.
For me that was definitely a factor, like to see that the community felt smaller. So I sort of like I felt like I knew the faces like that popped up on GitHub and Twitter, and so that does make it less intimidating. And I also think that on web the ecosystem, like the amount of options you have to build a website is huge compared to mobile apps.
That makes sense.
And right, we don't have that many options for good mobile apps. So they're just like, when you take the percentage,
Yep.
Yeah.
And the nice side effect of that community-driven technology is, well, conferences. You get to meet all these people face to face. Like, I remember working with .NET a lot back in the days, and .NET is a big, nice technology, but it's curated by the huge company, right? It's not. It wasn't open source back then, and I remember that every conference was meeting nice people, of course, but these people are just random people working with this technology, not working on the technology, which is so much different experience than when you go to the React Native, let's say React Native EU last year, right? You were there, all of you were there, and it was so much fun to just see those people who as those legends of React Native, and it turns out these are actually normal, nice people. You can hang out with them. This is so cool.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So let's tackle this. How you would compare learning React / React Native back in the days, right? When you started, to like newcomers nowadays. And I'm talking here about, some maybe not specifically challenges, but different approaches, right? When we started, there were class components, for example. Nowadays, you start off by learning that there were class components, but don't use them. There are functional components now, right? So stuff like this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
If I can butt in, like, the worst thing I see on Reddit is people saying, I don't know JavaScript and I'm trying to learn React Native. And I see that post and it's just, you're setting yourself up for disaster. Everybody, please learn React Native, but please start with like at least some basics of JavaScript. You can go to W3 schools. Some people love it, some people hate it, but at least, something to have like a basic understanding of JavaScript, and then go ahead and dive into some React and then React Native. And that's a good path. That's the same path that we took 5 years ago. It's the same path now, except with better docs that look better.
Yeah, they're great.
Shout out to Rachel and Dan for that, especially.
Yes,
definitely.
But yeah, I really like your comment, Ola, that start with the basics, right? And it's interesting because you can learn React and React Native without knowing JavaScript. I mean, it's possible. It's just not gonna bring
don't.
Yeah, but just don't do that. Like, imagine you're trying to build a wooden table, but you don't know how to use the saw. How to saw the wood, right? Yeah. So you're gonna start breaking it on your knee and hope that it's gonna be even and nice. No, it doesn't work like this.
That's a good metaphor. Yeah.
Like for me personally, I think, the major changes we already talked about, but like learning React first, like you're presented with so many options, it's almost overwhelming. So I think like Roadmap SH does a really good job of like telling you the different paths you can take. And it makes you start from JavaScript. So I love that. But with React Native as well, like it takes you through different options you have. And I think there's a shift in like thinking on the React side and React Native side of things. Like React Native had an RFC recently, and it's looking at React Native as a framework, and then you have tools on top of that will help you build those production level apps. And I think, React Native themselves recommend Expo as that way of building your React Native apps. And that doesn't mean that you have to use Expo, but it does make it a lot easier. So I would say, like, if you're learning for the first time, like, yes, you can use those tools to sort of make, creating your first app a little bit easier. Pick one path. There's so many options. When we look at state management, for example, you've got like 6 different options. Which one do you go for? But I think picking one and then sort of working your way through the rest is a lot easier than looking at everything and just being like, okay, what do I do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And good thing that you mentioned state management, because I think we are heading to this specific topic, which is like, okay, so what kind of choice we got? We got the Redux, we got MobX, ZooStand, Jotai, Recoil, and X-State. I never met X-State anywhere in a project, but I know it exists. So we got so much choice, and there's also context, right? I mean, it's not specifically state management, but you can use it this way. So how do we choose one, right? Like if I'm a newcomer, I got all this stuff, people will feed me Redux, but it's just not great to learn as a beginner. So, how do I make a good choice? Ola, I know you know a few things about state management for a reason. Why don't you take over?
I have my reason to learn them.
She wrote a book, guys. Read the book.
I wrote
an amazing book. So, sorry.
Thank you. And I see all the state management you mentioned. My book was published last year, and there's already a few new ones that are coming up, and they're looking good, like Legend State, and also Anisha showed me like the T. Oh my gosh, I forgot the name. Tea leaf. Yeah. So I looked at that, and it looks very interesting. So it basically comes down to your opinions, and you can write a lot of stuff. You should really always start with just your app and context, and only at the moment where you see that is not enough should you start looking into something more. And then it's a question of preference, really. There are people who maybe create benchmarks that something works better than something else, but it's going to be like milliseconds of differences. So we go back to what you mentioned, Kuba, before, which is DX and what you feel comfortable with, what you like using. And so that's that. There are, it's categorized, and we talked a moment before. Anisha, you want to touch on that, on the categories of state management?
Sure. So I think like when I was trying to learn state management, like the only option was Redux, and I was overwhelmed. And I think like what helped me learn about the rest was like seeing what categories things fall into. So I think like when you look at Redux and ZooStand, like it's more reducer based, like, you're having dispatching actions to that centralized state, which is often like what people call like the single source of truth. And then with Recoil and Jotai, it's more atom based. So state is split into like those tiny pieces of data, which people call atoms. And it can be read and written to by the hooks. And then I think MobX falls into like observable state, where you can track the dependencies between the state and the components. So that's sort of like, I kind of jotted this down, and I was like, this is how my brain kind of puts these categories. And I think there's an article I read that categorizes them into something similar. But like looking at them as those three helps you think. So if I've learned, for example, Redux, ZooStand might be a bit easier to learn. Or, for example, if I've learned Recoil, Jotai would have a similar pattern of looking at things. But I think it's really nice that, like, you don't have to learn Redux anymore. And Redux from back in the day, it's become Redux Toolkit. It's so much easier. It's so much nicer to use. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Redux Toolkit is definitely like the way to go. If anybody starts a new project with Redux today, please don't just go like, try Redux Toolkit, at least take a look. And besides the categories you mentioned, there's XState that, as Kuba mentioned as well, it sort of like escapes all other categories. It's my personal favorite. When I do private projects, I always use XState because it presents your state as a state machine. So you have to think about the states of the things you're coding. So you have a button, you have to think of the states that it can be in, and it can be like active or disabled or whatever. I like, so again, this is a personal preference. I just like, it works for my brain. It's fine. I like it. I think it's nice.
All right. And as you said, it all goes down to the opinion, and, it's fine to have your own preferences. Anisha, do you have your favorite one?
Yeah, mine definitely is a stand. I think it's just super easy to use. And like, the fact that it leverages hooks, you can have like your state set up in like 10 lines of code, which I think coming from having to set up like Redux with, your actions and dispatchers, and you'd have like 5 different files, and then you'd still be like doing like the spaghetti in your head as to where things are coming from.
Yeah.
Like, it's just nice to look at and use. But I think, the state of React Native like shows a really good trend of like where everything's going. So if you're still confused and you don't like our personal opinions, which you should, then good to check it out. Like, I think React Query is one of the ones that's on the rise a lot recently.
Like React Query, or like the official name Callstack Query now.
Callstack,
that's like a very interesting part of our world, because I find that for many devs who have never worked with it, it's difficult to wrap their heads around the fact that it's not really state management. Yeah. It's not really caching, but it's sort of in the middle. And I've seen many developers who start working with it, and they try to mix Redux with React Query, kind of like fill in holes that are not there, because React Query or Callstack Query is already doing all that for you. So if you're like starting to work with Callstack Query, make sure to go through the documentation, because like there's a 90% chance that whatever you're trying to do, you're going to find that in the documentation. Mm-hmm. And it's covered there.
Do you have section in your book on React Query?
Yes, I do.
Then look up this source as well. Yeah, but my favorite one is MobX for a change. So we got all different.
Have you tried Valtio?
No, I don't even know if I've heard of it.
Oh, it's supposed to be like the better MobX. It's the same as Zustand is for Redux. That's Valtio for MobX.
All right, I'm going to check this out.
It's created by the same like Poimandres, so it's like a community of developers.
Okay, sounds interesting. Yeah, and I think this is a great place to encourage our viewers on YouTube, I suppose. If you have your opinions, drop a comment. It's all awesome to see why people choose specific things. We all learn here. Go on, Anisha. I interrupted.
No, I was just going to ask Ola, like, do you think that the rise in like interest for React Query comes from, the rise in the introduction of server components?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Actually, well, I'm not sure about the source. No, I'm not sure. My first thought was yes, but then I'm not sure if maybe it was sort of developed independently, that the React server components saw the same need as the developers of React Query, that this is what we need. We need a better cooperation with the server. We need better control over cache and the data that comes in. So, yeah, that's what I think.
Maybe it just happened like by chance in parallel.
Yeah, it's possible too.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like, because React Query is with us for some time now. I don't remember when it got popular, but I remember it's been at least 2 years, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and I don't know if they already had an idea of server components back then. But yeah. Okay. I think that, if we had the whole day, we could stick to the state management discussion, because it sounds really cool. And I feel like I can learn a lot from you guys. So,
and if somebody who's watching feels like doing some like history digging into the Internet of Things, please leave a comment with information if you find it.
That would be awesome. All right, but let's leave it here. Let's leave our audience a little hungry for knowledge, so they actually do the research, right?
Yeah.
And I would like to ask you, what do you think is the future of state management in React Native? What it can look like, moving on? Because you pointed really nicely. React query or RTK query is taking its space right now. People are starting using it more and more and trying to understand it deeper. That's great. So what is next? Maybe Anisha, I will give it to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think so the way that I would say we'd have to take learnings from probably the way state management's going in React, and I would say the reason we're seeing a trend, for example, Zustan and the minimalistic state management libraries is because that's sort of what people want. They want an easier way to handle state management. So I think we'll see probably a rise in trend in those minimalistic state libraries. Maybe there'll be something new. I think the fact that React server components are becoming such a big thing, there will be probably changes in the way that we think about state management. The hooks don't work if you're doing server-side rendering. And that's also probably why React query in the React world is becoming more and more popular, because people need a way to do server-side state management. So I don't know if that trend will come through to React Native, but it'd be interesting to see. I don't I've touched on turbo modules and the new architecture in my learning, but seeing how, for example, that the new JS bridge and how we interact with native modules, I don't know enough. So if anybody does, please do leave some comments to help me with my learning. But is there going to be a trend around how state management works with native modules? That's just a theoretical question.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Ola, you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, I had one thought when you were asking a question, because you mentioned RTK query. So I remember that there's also Redux Toolkit query and Callstack query. So that points to the fact that there is interest in those solutions, and people are trying. People behind Redux Toolkit realize that they can add this to their library, and it's great. We're actually using it in our project, and then I like using it. It's nice. And at Callstack, we have a thing called upskilling days. So once a month, we have a full day of trying to learn new things. And actually yesterday, we had a talk by Szymon, who was speaking about over-the-air updates to apps, where we can leverage server-side components, right? Am I remembering this right?
Yeah.
Because this was yesterday. So it's fresh in my mind. I'm not sure, it's not, it's not settled down. But this was the first time when every time before his talk, when I saw people talking about server components, I was thinking for React Native, what's the point for React Native? I don't care that much. I'm not reading into the article. I'm going to spend 20 minutes on something else. But So yesterday he planted the seed in my brain that maybe this is something really viable for our use cases, for our apps, and for pushing changes to React Native apps.
Mm-hmm. But this is still an idea, right? I mean, there is. I think there. I don't remember correct right now if Szymon mentioned that, but there are some works, proof of concept works around this or not. Do you remember, Ola?
We will need to ask him exactly. Yeah. I remember him explaining that when you do over the air, of course, there are some problems because you have Apple that Apple doesn't like you to update your app too much over the air, right? They don't like you to change the bundle too much. But there, once you do those over the air updates, you can add more stuff if you do server components. It's supposed to be easier and it's more straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that Szymon also has a talk on that topic from conference in Berlin, and I think it's online. You can look it up. So if possible, we'll drop the link in the notes of this episode so everybody can check it out and learn new things. Maybe we can actually settle down our knowledge, because from yesterday, so much information.
Yeah.
But that's really, really interesting perspectives. And the let me put it in the right words. The way that React Forget is bringing, it's taking away the responsibility for us to like care about this performance memoization and stuff like that. I'm wondering if some solutions, maybe, not this specific, because that's a compiler, right? But similar approaches to state management, if anybody will try to take on that. So they're going to build like a solution that's going to take care of all the state management in our app, so we don't need to care about it. We just use it like a variables anywhere, right? That'll be very simplified approach, but it sounds very tough to tackle that. I'm just wondering if somebody will ever have a courage to do this.
I mean, if you're talking about the React team, I think what they did with context was their sort of them trying, right, to dip their toe in the state management. And I don't want to be mean, but for me, it sort of backfired because, you really have to know how to use it in order not to break the performance of your app. So it's not the best thing that exists in the React world. Like, context is not my favorite feature of React.
Yeah. It's not the most intuitive one, right? I mean, it's an interesting take. I like that it's just out of the box, right? But yeah, as you said, you need to understand how to use it, otherwise you're going to break your app.
It is. Yeah, it's like, I love hooks. I use hooks like every day at work, and I think that feature is great and it's thought out and it's awesome. I'm just not a big fan of context.
I think it depends. I think like people need to understand like what to use context for and what not to use context for. I think what happens is, as a new developer, like you're probably like, oh, okay, this works for state management. You throw everything in a context, like you said. But like when you're using it for something like a theme, it makes sense. When you're using it to like handle the entire state of your application, you're probably better off like going with a state management solution.
Yeah.
And I think those like do's and don'ts, like when not to use state management, maybe Ola, we could write an article or something. Maybe somebody already has. If you find an article on this, like please drop it in the comments as well.
We can write a better one. No worries.
Exactly. Exactly. But with the context, it's also, as I said, you can store a theme. That's a great idea when you wrap up your whole app in this. But you can also have dozens smaller contexts to manage the state. But then you give up on the readability of your code because it's just going to get messy, right? So there are, pros and cons of everything, basically. But
I'm very curious about what's coming this year in React, because it seems like React is... the latest changes that they announced. So not React Forget, but React Compiler, and they're supposed to remove use memo and use callback, right? Sort of hide it under the hood. So React is maybe becoming a little more of a black box, but maybe that's okay. Maybe that's why it's going to be even more comfortable to use. I feel that this year is going to be. I feel and I hope that this year is going to bring some big changes, like in React 18.
Well, thinking about it this way, it makes sense, of course, but it also kind of resonates with what we were talking about before. So before, React was not that easy to work with, but because of that, you had to understand how to work with it. Then they started taking away stuff, making things simpler and more comfortable, but giving up on the deeper knowledge that you were required to have. Now, compiler takes away the knowledge of the memoization. You don't need that anymore. Question is, will this introduce issues like, will there be stuff that we actually need to understand when using this compiler, or will it be like just so simple, like a walk in the park? Just plug it in, that's it, So it's becoming a black box. Is it good? Maybe, but maybe people will just not care about details anymore, and that's not going to be great, right? So we'll see.
I'd like to quote my favorite JavaScript newsletter, which is bytes.dev, and it's definitely like my favorite newsletter of all newsletters. And in the last newsletter, they wrote that the React compiler will take away the need to talk with that one teammate that you have that thinks we should memo all the things. So we all have that one teammate that thinks we should memo all the things. So that's definitely a big pro. Like, let's do that.
So you can fire that guy already. Nah, don't do that. He's actually useful.
He's useful, but we don't need to talk about memo anymore. So that's good.
Take it out of the memo. All right, ladies. We are slowly heading towards the end of this one. And you know what? I have to share it with our listeners. Before, when we were planning this episode, we wanted to talk about women in tech, right? That was the idea before that. But we were like, you know what? Let's talk about state of the React, because that's just interesting and fun.
Because women are people too.
No, you say it. Yeah, you say it, Ola.
I'm just supporting you here. I cannot tell, but so that was the idea, and because of that, for like at the end of the episode, I would still like to ask you, what would be your tips for women looking to start making their first steps in tech? Maybe they want to start learning programming, or maybe they are on their already junior positions and they want to just grow. So do you have any maybe personal experiences, or you've heard of something that, might be really useful for them? I will give it a go for Anisha.
Yeah, so I think the reason we didn't want to do just a women in tech episode is to we're not just women in tech. Like we are React Native developers, and we wanted to show I guess younger women that you shouldn't be categorized as just a woman in tech. Like, that's not our label. Paula has written a book. She's one of the leading experts. I've learned so much already in probably just the 2 hours we've spoken. And I think, that we have a lot of knowledge to share, and we want to be able to share that as experts in the React Native field, not women in tech. And we just thought, okay, fine, let's not do the usual thing and actually show young women that you can start from anywhere. Like, Ola, you started from languages. I started from engineering. You can start from anywhere, and you can go into the tech field, and you might have a windy path, but you'll find your kind of spot. And so my advice to anybody, I wouldn't even say a young woman in tech, is don't be intimidated by the depth or the mass world out there of what to learn. Kind of just take your path and choose different, when there's options, choose one and learn it. And the best way to kind of learn is by sharing. And in fact, I do recognize though that there is obviously I wouldn't even say problem. I would say there is, I don't even know what the right word is, but there probably people young women in tech want to see more women, people that look like them in senior positions. So you want to see how did Ola end up where she is? How did I end up where I am? Just because you want to see someone who looks like you doing the thing you want to do. And so I'm really looking to share kind of that story. So I'm going to try and record some similar to this, actually, some fireside chats with some of the women who've inspired me in my journey, and just see how they got to the point where they are. So it's going to be called Her Code Stories, and it's just going to be a woman telling her story, how she ended up where she is. So hopefully that helps young women learn or want to get into tech, because I think the only way to solve the problem is to get more people like Ola, who are in these amazing positions, doing amazing things out there in the open, sharing the technical work they're doing. So yeah, that's my long-winded answer. Sorry.
There was an awesome answer. I could sign with both hands. Seriously. What I would like to add is that it is a fact that there's less women in tech than maybe in other positions, but there's more and more. And I would recommend looking for maybe role models on the internet. You can there's a bunch of girls that do tech on Twitter, and who are hilarious and smart, and it's really fun to look at what they write. And my biggest advice to anybody who wants to get into tech, either you're a boy or a girl, is that do not get discouraged if you don't like the tech that you're working with. And actually, Anisha, your past is also a proof of that. You start with something, you start with engineering, but you didn't like that, so you look for something else. And there's so many things. Even if you decide that you want to do web, there's a gazillion things you can choose from. There's backend development, front, full stack, whatever, and you can code cars or refrigerators, whatever. There's seriously, and don't feel bad if what you're trying to learn doesn't spark joy. It's you don't have to, you can just switch. You can try a different technology and find something that you do like. And once you find it, you'll have fun working with it.
Lovely.
Yeah.
What a great set of tips for everyone, not just for women. I agree with that because I would say the same to anyone. Maybe one more thing I could add to this one is if you're starting, maybe not even starting, when you are even a seniors have this problem, start putting value on yourself. Like your work is worth a lot, and you need to realize that when you're going for a job interview and the money doesn't satisfy you, negotiate. You are not there because they don't have any choice. They do have a choice, but prove your value, right? Don't end up being the person who just took the job because you were nice, and don't do that. So that will be my advice at the end. So thank you very much, Anisha. Thank you very much, Ola. It was my pleasure to have you on this coffee talk. I hope our audience will take away a lot from this. I feel like there were some great tips, some great discussion sparkers and idea givers. So let's see where it goes. I hope people will leave some comments with their ideas or their research.
We're waiting for that research on server components. Come on,
Yes.
Come on, internet, do your thing.
And if you have any, ideas of what you might like what you're going to see in 2024, and I think all of us would love to hear.
Definitely.
If there's a way to make testing on TV easier, also just please tell me, because that is my bane. 2024, that is all I want to know.
So I'm going to test my TV today after work. I'm going to just sit down on a couch and start testing.
You can hire
All
all
right.
to do the focus management testing. I actually like
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Oh my
All
God,
right.
they're going to keep me to that at work now. They're going to
That's
give me
just
all
gonna
the
be
focus box.
That's gonna be your LinkedIn title. She
Oh
loves
no.
focus management, and everyone's gonna unfriend you because that is just weird.
Can we get right? Can we cut it out?
I don't think so. It's going live. Just kidding. We shall see about this. But for now, we're going to end this here. And last few words from me. Please sign up, people, for Callstack newsletter because it is for developers, for tech leaders, but not only. Also for people who want to get in there and start coding and get your foot in the door. There's some great content there. There is some blog stuff. There is some podcast stuff and others. So go ahead and sign up. And that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you're going to have a great day, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is at your place. Have it great. And see you in the next one.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.